On September 1st, 1951, hundreds of people boarded the Fisherman's Special train in New York City, bound for the furthest tip of Long Island, known as Montauk Point. When they arrived, many of these people disembarked the train, went out onto the docks, and got onto a small fishing vessel known as the FV Pelican for what was supposed to be a day of simple offshore fishing. The Pelican was licensed to carry 30 people, but because of the Labor Day crowds, the captain chose to allow 62 passengers aboard that day, along with the 2 crew members. The deck was crowded, but nobody really seemed terribly concerned. That is, of course, until several hours later, when, while out fishing, dark clouds began to gather. Captain Eddie Carroll turned the Pelican back for shore, and when he did so, one of the engines went out. With only one engine, their progress back to shore was extremely slow, and the storm continued to gather over the Atlantic. Eventually, the onshore wind combined with the outgoing tide began to create these towering waves out over Montauk Point. The Pelican was in trouble. Then, 2 massive breakers hit the Pelican one after another. It threw many of the people that were on the deck into the freezing Atlantic and trapped several others inside of the cabin as the boat began to capsize. By the time help arrived, 45 of the 64 people that were aboard the Pelican that day had been lost. It's this tragedy that inspired the haunting final track of Brand New's album Deja Entendu, titled Play Crack the Sky. In 1999, on Long Island in New York, Jesse Lacey and his childhood best friend John Nolan form a band that you've probably heard of before called Taking Back Sunday. Okay, so John Nolan and Jesse Lacey, they've been friends since elementary school, and they're kind of coming up through middle school, high school, in this kind of tight-knit Long Island music scene where there's starting to be a new genre that's forming. People are taking the kind of punk rock energy and then fusing that with more emotional and introspective, maybe lyrics, and creating this genre that would come to be known as emo. So Nolan and Lacey playing together in Taking Back Sunday, they're playing together for about a year. They record the first EP for Taking Back Sunday, and then the friendship falls apart. Lacey's girlfriend cheats on him with his best friend, with John Nolan. And because of this, like I said, the friendship falls apart, but then also Lacey leaves Taking Back Sunday and goes off to do his own thing. It's probably only maybe 6 months later that Jesse Lacey has found some former bandmates and formed the aptly named at the time band Brand New. And ever since then, the lineup of Brand New has pretty much been exactly the same, right? You've got Jesse Lacey on rhythm guitar and on lead vocals, and also writing the majority of the music. Vincent Accardi on the lead guitar, and he also does a lot of the backup vocals and the harmonizations that you'll hear. You've got Garrett Tierney on bass, and then Brian Lane on the drums. So after forming in 2001, Brand New releases their debut album called Your Favorite Weapon. And I think the fallout between Jesse Lacey and John Nolan, those feelings are still pretty fresh, and it's pretty apparent in the lyrics of this album. The songs just kind of sound like teenage angst and heartbreak, very much what you picture when you picture the sound of emo, I would say. Specifically, the song 70 times 7 is very pointed. It pretty not so subtly wishes a horrible death on John Nolan and on Lacey's former girlfriend. The next year, Taking Back Sunday releases their debut album. It's called Tell All Your Friends, and the song There's No I in Team pretty much fires back at Brand New, and specifically at Jesse Lacey. And I think fans at the time of this genre of music that were into Taking Back Sunday and into Brand New pretty much realized quickly that this was kind of just a early 2000s emo diss track battle. As Taking Back Sunday and Brand New gained in popularity, the bands kind of continued to go back and forth for many years. I'll spare you all the details, but there's a fairly funny t-shirt that I was able to find that summarizes it pretty well. Two years after Brand New released their first album, they released their sophomore, Déjà Entendu. Now, you're probably familiar with the term déjà vu.
Oh, déjà vu.
Which is French meaning already seen. And it's supposed to have this kind of eerie quality to it, like you've already seen it and it reminds you of an experience that you've already had. Similarly, Déjà Entendu is meant to have a similar vibe, but instead of with something you've seen, it means already heard. So it's kind of a similar idea, but just with hearing instead of sight. I think there's probably two ways that you could interpret that as the title for this album. You could either take it to mean kind of a self-critical way of all of their music is kind of derivative, it's unoriginal, you've heard this before. I think there's another interpretation there, and the one that I think maybe I prefer, which is more like a positive take on that, like something you've heard before, but it's familiar, and just generally a positive meaning of you've heard it before. It sounds kind of timeless, or like something that similar to works of the past, but in a new light. I think Brand New kind of realized that with the release of their first album, they were being lumped into this category of emo music, and a lot of people had the interpretation that that music all kind of sounded the same, and they wanted to acknowledge the fact that people felt that way, while at the same time trying to escape it, right? These are creative guys, and nobody creative wants to feel like they're just releasing something that's already been done. Kind of ironic for somebody that has a covers channel to say, but I feel like you want to feel like you're on the cutting edge of creating something new and interesting and worth doing. And so they wanted to, with the title of this album, acknowledge that people felt like this music kind of sounded a bit cookie cutter, while also trying to overcome that with the sounds that they were producing. And I think they achieved that on this album. I have to say, I feel like listening to their first album and then going to their second album, you definitely notice a lot of, I would say, improvements. The lyrics are more, for the most part, more complex and more nuanced. The production style is a huge leap forward. I would say the quality of the recording is better, but also the textures that they create and just the layers of music, and there's little like kind of quiet sounds all kind of tucked away in here. And then another huge improvement that they make is their vocal harmonies. I feel like the harmonies on this album are much tighter, much more intricate, and that's kind of a signature of their sound, and I think they made some pretty big leaps on that as well. But despite all of those complexities, it's important to remember that at the heart of the band is still kind of the same person. It's Jesse Lacey, who wrote all of these lyrics and songs by himself, reportedly like in his bedroom while they were on tour for Your Favorite Weapon. And he's the one that's creating all of this music. And actually, as part of the release of this album, I think maybe they released it at their merch booth at concerts. They had a lyrics book that is all handwritten notes from Lacey. It includes like all the lyrics to the songs for the album written out, as well as I'll put some pictures up on the screen if I can get them. But the lyrics written out, the chords for most of the songs written out, and there's just some like interesting tidbits in there as well that, you know, if you're a fan of the band or a fan of the album, I think you probably will think is cool. So when you go give this album a listen, I think one thing that you'll notice right away is that the song titles don't really match the lyrics or even kind of the general vibe of each one of the songs. And I think that's kind of an intentional thing that Brand New has done here. I'll give you an example. The opening track is called Totu. And it seems that that's just named after the actress Audrey Tautou, who famously played the lead role in the 2001 film Amelie. Another example, there's a song called Guernica that's named after a Picasso painting. Again, not really a lot of similarities between the theme of that painting and the sound vibe lyrics of that song. There's another track that may have the most emo title of all time. It's called Good to Know That If I Ever Need Attention, All I Have to Do Is Die. So, yeah, I think probably the most standout track on this album, and certainly I think it's the most popular song from the band actually, is The Quiet Things That No One Ever Knows. And even though this album has a few songs that are pretty big standouts in their catalog, I think another thing that really sets this album apart is that there's not really very many weak points. You know, is every song on this album a 10 out of 10? No, I don't think I would say that. But I would gladly listen to this album as an album, no skips, which is kind of a rare thing, I feel like, to have an album that's front to back pretty good. The album is full of roaring guitars, loud harmonized choruses, pretty intricate drums actually. If you ever see them perform live or go check out any videos of Brand New performing live, quite a few of these songs actually require them to bring in a second drummer to be able to perform a lot of the tracks, just because of how they like multi-tracked stuff on the album and added a lot of complexity that I think they just couldn't achieve live. And so they actually will bring in a decent amount of additional musicians, but the second drummer is something that you don't see very often, and I thought was pretty interesting. But after all of that, right, after all of that complexity on the album, we come to this last song on the album, which is the focus of our cover today, and it's titled Play Crack the Sky. And this song kind of strips back a lot of that complexity and leaves us just with how the song was originally written, which is Jesse Lacey singing and playing an acoustic guitar. And the lyrics of the song take that tragic story that we started off with about the FV Pelican and transforms it into a metaphor about love and loss, and talks about how a brief, unexpected relationship can come along and kind of just leave your life in shambles. But then this song is also kind of two songs in one, in that, we have a couple verses of this relative simplicity where, it's just Jesse Lacey, like I said, just Jesse singing, and there's some backup vocals and stuff, but it's fairly simple in comparison to most of the other songs on this album. But then it climaxes when it transitions to a new section that begin with the lyrics, quite literally, "This is the end." And yeah, it's the end of the album, so maybe it's a bit on the nose, but then also I think it's kind of the end of a relationship. It could be interpreted as the end of the narrator's life. But this portion of the song kind of keeps that acoustic guitar going, but it brings back a lot of the harmonized vocals, the left-right pan of vocals, like switching back and forth, high harmonized secondary vocals, and then even like some additional like kind of ambient voices that really give a lot of depth and complexity to the sound of the song. If you go take a look at the notes that I referred to, Jesse refers to this section as the vamp out. And I just kind of love how this section takes the vocals and blends them together to create this sort of like haunting, somewhat disorienting atmosphere. Definitely recommend you listen to it on headphones if you can. I think that really brings the like panning and everything that's happening kind of to life that you would certainly lose if you listen to it on your phone, but you'd probably still get it if you listen to it on a good stereo. But I think headphones really bring that together. But yeah, incredible track. And then one other thing that I thought was kind of interesting is after the song ends, the track is still going, and you can kind of hear Jesse Lacey walk out of the recording studio, and he sings Never to See Any Other Way, which I think is a pretty clear reference, even though it's kind of a slight misquote, pretty clear reference to the end of the Beatles album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where they have a similar kind of repeating thing, that never to see any other way. And this is, I think, kind of a nod at how the Beatles influenced the band. The Beatles also known for a lot of vocal harmonies. No, I wouldn't say that Brand New sounds a lot like the Beatles, generally speaking, but that doesn't mean that they weren't an influence. And actually, I think Lacey has specifically cited the Beatles as one of his influences. Of course, there's maybe more obvious influences, something like the Smiths or something that played a bigger role in the sound of Brand New. But I think that the Beatles are definitely there, and the ending of this track is a nod to that fact. Okay, so let's talk music theory for a minute here, and I'll explain kind of the general layout of the song. So the song is, I think of it as being in the key of G, but the thing is, this isn't the primary chord that's being played, because the guitar that it's being played on is tuned down a half step. So you're actually down here. Okay, so the key of G on a guitar tuned down a half step basically means that you're in the key of F sharp. But most guitarists wouldn't explain it to you that way. They'd say it's, like I said, key of G tuned down a half step. To make things a little bit more confusing, you'll see that I actually keep my guitar tuned down a full step, so 2 half steps. So you'll actually see me playing with a capo on the first fret to bring it back up such that it's in the same tuning that is used on the album. Half step down, G, shape, F sharp chord. Okay? The song is mostly in 6/8 time. Maybe also a little bit confusing there in that when the song starts on the album, you'll hear Jesse Lacey count in as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that kind of implies that it's probably in 3/4 time. 3/4 time tends to be more like a waltz kind of sound, and I think 6/8 fits more with the vibe of this actual track. But yeah, you can make the argument for either one, and they're really not that different other than just how you count it. But I would say this is in 6/8, and Jesse Lacey was just kind of in error by saying 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. He should have been saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Either way, though, that's the time signature for the majority of the song. And I actually did find that to be a little bit challenging to play because I recorded the guitar part first on the cover. And with no drums or anything to go off of, I was trying to play along with a metronome. And the song also has these kind of half measure pauses between some of the sections. So it'll be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it was difficult for me to remember where those go. And then also, and it didn't really sound right if you didn't do it. That's how they do it in the original song. So I needed to, I just couldn't remember where they went. And then also because this half measure was also a pause, I was coming in late to the next full measure, and that was causing it to sound bad too. So it took a decent amount of practice to nail that. And the only other thing that was weird with the time signature is this is the end section, the vamp out. That switches from 6/8 to 4/4. So it's a little bit difficult when you're the only instrument, non-vocal instrument anyway, and you're having to kind of hold down the rhythm and provide all of the musical context as the guitarist. Because switching those time signatures, I just found it to be kind of difficult to actually really nail that switch and do it correctly and have it sound good in sync with everything else. Otherwise, I don't feel like this song is terribly challenging. You'll see, so like I said, you're basically playing a G. We know it's down a half step. You go up to this C shape. I think this is really a C7, right? Because this is a C, and you're effectively flatting this C, this octave, down to a B. But then you're also playing this a G, what is a G, or you'd think of as a G on the high string, which is already part of the C chord. So like that, C7. And then he also goes and adds like sort of the ring finger on the B string to go up to a B, C, D, right? So, and that D would be the second, because C, D. So technically you're going G, C7, and then C7 suspended second, back to C7. Another thing he does in this song that's kind of interesting is basically your pinky is just on this G note on almost every single chord. Sorry, you can't see. So he plays the G with his pinky there, he plays the C with the pinky there, and then he even plays the E minor that he goes to. The pinky's still there, so normally the E minor would have this high note would be an E, and instead he has his pinky on it, like that. And then finally there's this kind of funky shape that I don't know what to call it. It's a A. You're not playing this string. But it's an A with that high G as well. I'll have to think about what that's called. I'll put it up on the screen if I can figure it out. But anyways, the shape is just, you're only having to put your finger down in two places. Otherwise, it's just all open strings. So it's not that hard. It's just kind of an unusual shape, not one that's typically played. So anyway, I hope you check out the cover. I'm going to post it as a separate video from this one. I had some issues on the previous video where I had it inside of the appreciating the music video as well as a separate video. So I'm just going to post it as a totally separate video still on this channel. So go check that out, and I'll definitely put a link in the description of this video, as well as I'll try to put a link on the screen somewhere for how to go find that video, the cover video. I guess now is as good a time as any to also ask you to subscribe if you're enjoying this. I know everybody does that. I'm not very good about putting videos out on a consistent basis. So subscribing to the channel is the best way for you to be informed whenever I put a new video up. So yeah, if you're enjoying it, please go subscribe to the channel. It helps me grow the channel too, which is always a good thing. So thank you. I'm going to leave you with this. There's a lot of speculation online about the meaning of this song's title. Some people think that Play Crack the Sky is a reference to the band called Crack the Sky. And this interpretation kind of makes sense because Crack the Sky actually has a song called A Sea Epic, where there is a wreck at sea and there's only 2 survivors. And I think the similarities between the lyrics of these 2 songs really kind of lends itself to that being the meaning of the song. I'm pretty sure that's not the case though. I'll tell you another one. I saw a theory that Crack the Sky apparently is a term used for smoking crack, and that the song is actually about somebody that reaches, either they're in recovery and they reach out for help in the middle of the night and they don't get that help and they end up overdosing and dying. And so that's what Crack the Sky is about. Play Crack the Sky. And again, I like the creativity there. I'm pretty sure this isn't actually the meaning of the song. And the reason I'm pretty sure about that is because I actually was able to find a Q&A with Jesse Lacey where somebody specifically asks him about the meaning of the title of this song. If I can find the video again, I'll put it in the description of the video, but I'll summarize it for you basically. Lacey starts off by kind of mentioning what I was telling you before, that a lot of the song's titles are intentionally not related to the content of the songs, that most of the titles are inside jokes or nods to other things and generally just pretty unrelated. And goes on to tell this story of how when he was in high school, he was pretty into Christian rock, and he went to this kind of small Christian rock show with his best friend, John Nolan. Remember all of the drama that I told you about before between Jesse Lacey and John Nolan. So he talks about how they go to this small concert, and as one of the bands is coming out on stage, Nolan recognizes one of the members of this band as being a fellow named Mylon Lefevre. Now, apparently Mylon Lefevre was a hair metal 1980s guy, and he had given up that life of debauchery of 1980s hair metal and had found Jesus and become this Christian rocker, and changed his look quite a bit. Most people didn't really even know about his previous band, but John Nolan, being pretty big into music, still recognized him. And one of the big songs that Mylon had when he was a hair metal 80s rocker guy is a song called Crack the Sky. So this band's coming out on stage at this Christian rock show, and the main guy, the singer and guitar player, thinks that he's kind of escaped this hair metal life and is able to go do these Christian rock shows, when John Nolan shouts out, "Play Crack the Sky." And immediately, the way that Lacey tells the story anyway, Mylon realizes that he's been recognized and is immediately embarrassed by this, like visibly embarrassed. And of course, these two high school kids think that this is like the funniest thing they've ever seen. And so it became an inside joke between Nolan and Lacey. So, in light of that, here's my final interpretation of the song. I don't think the title is really unrelated at all. I think that it's a nod to a good memory that Lacey has with Nolan, and basically pointing to the friendship that they once shared. I think that it's actually this friendship that is the relationship that falls apart and is being talked about in the lyrics of this song. And maybe the wave that comes out of nowhere and leaves you on your own and leaves your life in shambles is that girlfriend that cheated on Lacey. And so maybe this is sort of a roundabout way of Lacey hoping that one day he can forgive Nolan for what happened. But I think that's kind of ultimately the meaning that I take away from this song. A woman coming between two friends and destroying their friendship. It's certainly happened a lot throughout history. And to quote the song, "The story is old. This is the end."